A charming woman testing her husband's fidelity by pretending to eat her zipper. She pretended to struggle with her zipper. It was just as she expected. She thought her husband still cared about her as he did in the past, but she didn't realize that her husband's thoughts were more than she could have imagined. Although they have a big daughter, but her husband was very dependent on her. When he saw his wife leaving the house, the husband pretended to tease her. If people talk to you when you're dressed up, you must say you're a married man, you know? The wife didn't take it seriously. She just thought her husband was teasing her. In the evening, in order to welcome a friend, the two of them drank a little wine. But I don't know why one glass of wine. She suddenly felt drunk. Just then, two handsome men approached her and asked for a drink. Ji Young wanted to refuse, but her friend, Singles, stopped her. So she asked them where they were drinking. She was told they were in the next room. Her friend was so happy that she didn't know what to do. But Ji Young was already drunk. But this drunkenness caused a problem. When she woke up, she was lying naked under the blanket. Her mind was blank until she heard her husband making breakfast downstairs. She realized she was home, so she put on her clothes and rushed downstairs. She saw her husband and daughter. She was so relieved that it wasn't an illusion, but she couldn't remember how she got home yesterday. So she checked her husband's face, but he poured water for her as usual. But strangely, he wore a ring in front of her. Ji Young was about to ask how she got home last night. At that moment, the water in the pot was boiling. I don't know if her husband was trying to hide it or just pretending. He just wouldn't answer her question. He hurriedly grabbed his daughter's bag and took her to school. Unbeknownst to her, her husband had disappeared. Ji Young was lying on the sofa. She fell asleep without realizing it. Suddenly, she was awakened by the ringing of her cell phone. There were more than 10 missed calls on her cell phone. They were all from the couple's law firm. She hurriedly called back. She realized that her husband hadn't been to the office today. He couldn't get through on the phone. And there's a very important court hearing today. She didn't have time to think. She rushed to the trial. After all, she was a prosecutor before her marriage. On the way, she read up on the case. A tenant was accidentally hit by a car and killed. The suspect is Kim Yoon-sun, an employee of the developer Kim Shin. An eyewitness said the victim ran in front of the car and caused the accident. Today happens to be the day of the witness's court appearance. Ji Young arrived at the court in time, but Kim Yoon-sun suddenly became very nervous when she saw the change of lawyers. She appointed Ji Young's husband as her defense. When she heard that he couldn't make it, the other party almost fell to the ground in disappointment. At that moment, Ma Jian, the head of Kim Shin, said, "You shouldn't change lawyers on such an important matter." Ji Young had to keep apologizing. He said it wouldn't affect the trial. As for the so-called eyewitness, Ma Jiang introduced him as Du Jinwoo. Then he leaned over and whispered in her ear. Before the trial started, Kim Yoon-sun suddenly disappeared because the defendant didn't show up in court and the lawyer was changed at the last minute. Unable to submit a written application, the judge decided to postpone the case to a month later. It's a good chance for Ji Young's side, but Ma Jiang is not satisfied. On the way back, she heard from her colleague. Her husband didn't want to take the case. My co-workers didn't know much about it. While Ji Young was waiting at the traffic light, she saw a blue band-aid on the driver's hand. There seemed to be a woman in the passenger seat. She didn't have time to think about it, so she ran after him and desperately looked into the other car. She finally saw the driver wearing a cap, and the husband had the same hat. But when she wanted to take a closer look, the driver suddenly turned into an alley. In her haste, she scraped against him. She could only watch the driver leave. Luckily, Ji Young had memorized the license plate number of the car. When she got back to the law firm, her husband's phone was still unanswered. Ji Young couldn't help but make a connection between Kim Yoon-sun and her husband. She couldn't get in touch with her husband until the end of the afternoon. In addition, Ma Jiang kept urging to find him, so she dialed her friend's number, asked her what happened last night. It turns out that two men came up to talk to her. The four of them played together. Ji Young called her husband and asked him to come over. Ji Young was worried that her husband would be pissed off if they went too far. Her friend confessed that she didn't get laid last night, so she didn't have to worry. After she hung up, she checked the car recorder. It did show her husband dropping her off. That's where things get weird. Why did her husband disappear for no reason? Just then, Ji Young saw Kim Yoon-sun coming to her door, and then a car came behind him. She was so scared that she ran away. The person who drove the car was Ma Jiang's secretary. The secretary came to ask when she could contact Ji Young's husband. The next day, the news reported a serious car accident in the tunnel. A male driver in his 30s was killed. Ji Young was worried that her husband had been killed. She called him immediately. There was still no answer. At that moment, Ma Jiang's call came in. Ji Young had to tell her that her husband hadn't come back yet. The man said he was working on many cases. He said he had to find him quickly. Ji Young understands. She mentioned that Kim Yoon-sun came to her door last night, but Ma Jiang told her to find her husband first. Then he told his secretary that Kim Yoon-sun might have other plans. Then the director called. He told her that the firm was vandalized. Not only were all the files disorganized, her husband's office was completely destroyed. She called the police. The officer in charge of this case, Mr. Beck, was sued by Ji Young for abuse of power years ago. Now we're in for a treat. The bank president suddenly called. Ji Young and her husband's loan is due. I didn't realize the firm had a debt of nearly $3 billion. The employees haven't been paid for 3 months. The utility bills have been in arrears for half a year. But Ji Young didn't know anything about it. But she promised to solve the payroll problem as soon as possible. That afternoon, Kim Yoon-sun called. He asked Ji Young to help him. They met under the overpass. Kim Yoon-sun said Ji Young's husband was a betrayer, but he put her to death. It turns out she wasn't the one who hit the car. It was only because she trusted Ji Young's husband that he took the blame. But he suddenly disappeared. She couldn't rest easy. So Ji Young's husband is a crooked lawyer. The witness, Do Jin-woo, is also a fake. At that moment, someone suddenly appeared behind her. Kim Yoon-sun thought Ji Young had called him and blamed her for not keeping her word. Then Kim Yoon-sun drove off in a hurry. The motorcycle rider was right behind him. Ji Young followed them in her car. During that time, she kept thinking about what Kim Yoon-sun said. Then she stopped the motorcycle. The motorcycle rider was Do Jin-woo. Ji Young had a lot of questions for him, but Do Jin-woo told her to ask her husband. Then the ambulance went to the direction where Kim Yoon-sun escaped. Then Ji Young got a call from the police. The police informed her that they found her husband's ID at the scene of the accident. Soon she came to the place where the accident happened. Standing on the cliff, Ji Young saw the police disposing of the body. She stumbled over to the body. At first glance, she saw the wedding ring on her ring finger. Ji Young's emotions broke down in an instant. It was the night of the murder. Her husband Hyuk-jae made a difficult decision. She parked her car at the edge of the cliff, then put the items that could prove her identity in the passenger drawer. She drove the car to the bottom of the cliff, risking certain death. Her parents-in-law came to the scene of the crime. The family couldn't cope with the loss of Hyuk. After the police investigation, the body's genes match Hyuk's. The time of death is estimated to be less than 18 hours. The cause of death was a skull fracture caused by the impact of the fall. He was gone the moment the car hit him. The police said the family can retrieve the body, but an autopsy may be needed to determine the exact cause of death. When she heard this, her mother-in-law was adamantly opposed. She thought her son had died a horrible death, and she couldn't leave his body intact. Seeing his wife's sadness, he wanted to refuse the autopsy. Ji Young asked him not to, and asked the police to follow the procedures of the autopsy, because she didn't believe her husband would commit suicide. But the father-in-law said, "The law firm has found his son's suicide note. It's obvious that your father-in-law has accepted the fact that his son committed suicide." Then Inspector Beck came in. Ji Young had asked him to look for her missing husband, but he refused to file a case because it didn't fit the missing persons program. Ji Young thought that if she had looked for him earlier, she could have prevented the tragedy. Now she wants him to do an autopsy, but before she could finish her sentence, her mother-in-law slapped her from behind. She warned Ji Young that no one would destroy her son's body. Then she dragged her daughter-in-law to the door of the morgue. Ji Young saw what Hyuk looked like with her own eyes. He threatened that if he had to do an autopsy, "Let's go in and take a good look." Then he pushed her hard. When Ji Young looked at the white cloth covering the body, she thought back to the day her father's accident happened when she was a child. She experienced the same scene as now. She slowly walked over to the body. The moment she lifted the white cloth, she couldn't bear the pain of losing a loved one twice. Ji Young fainted in no time. When she opened her eyes again, she was already in a hospital bed. She was surrounded by her best friend. Ji Young realized something was wrong. When she hurried to the funeral parlor, her husband's body had already been cremated. She cried and asked the staff to stop the cremation, because the cause of her husband's death hadn't been investigated yet. But Do Jin-woo, who was standing by, saw it all. It turns out that just yesterday, Kim Yoon-sun, the one who took the blame, also died. Ji Young calmed down. Ji Young opened her husband's suicide note. Hyuk-jae admitted that he was a coward. He planned to run away. He couldn't honor the agreement between husband and wife, because there's no going back. So he wished his wife a good life. The next day, a friend came over to comfort Ji Young and her daughter, but Ji Young couldn't believe that her husband would commit suicide. After all, they had lived together for 20 years. No one knew her husband better than she did, so she decided to find out the real reason for his death. She went to her husband's office. She didn't find any useful clues. At that time, the director reported that Kim Yoon-sun's trial was over. "I heard that he died in a traffic accident, so the court decided not to accept the judgment." In addition, the director also said Kim Shin Group had solved the case. Ji Young felt that it wasn't that simple, so he asked In-kyu from the law firm to go to Kim Yoon-sun's house to check it out. At that moment, he realized that someone was following him. Although In-kyu tried his best to chase after him, but he ran away. But he recognizes the stalker as Do Jin-woo. In-kyu told Ji Young about it. Ji Young remembers that this man seems to be close to Ma Jung, so she went to Jinshin Group alone. She wanted to find out what happened to Ma Jung. He thought that Kim Yoon-sun was dead and would never cause any trouble again, and the company gave a pension to settle the matter. Ji Young wanted to know if Kim Yoon-sun ran over the villagers or not, and whether her husband ordered Do Jin-woo to do something. When Ji Young asked where Do Jin-woo was, was. Ma Jiang threw a pile of documents in her face. He said, "It's all the trouble your husband left behind." Ji Young thought that 2 people had already died. She won't let it go so easily. Ma Jiang warned her to find out if she wanted to. The more you know about your husband, the more you'll want to kill him yourself. But as soon as Ma Jiang stepped into the elevator, the boss called. Ma Jiang said he'll take care of her men as soon as possible. On the other hand, Ji Young was in a state of shock as she was about to leave Kim Shin Group, but she found out on the bulletin board that the judge who tried Kim Yoon-sun for killing a villager was in league with Ma Jiang. She went back to the law firm and studied the case. In this case, Kim Yoon-sun was the first to die. Then they switched the real killer. The false witness was the husband of the second person who died. Now the only one left is Do Jin-woo. So Ji Young found him immediately. In fact, Ji Young has found out that Do Jin-woo will do anything for money. She can't rule out that he was ordered to kill by Ma Jiang. Do Jin-woo also met with her alone. Do Jin-woo confessed that he had killed before. He knows how pathetic it is, so he won't kill again. All the clues were cut off. Ji Young told her friend what was on her mind. She thinks that her husband's and Kim Yoon-sun's deaths must have something to do with the Kim Shin Group, but her friend thought that even if there was a connection, what could it be? She handed Ji Young a pile of documents. It turns out that Hyukja has filed for bankruptcy many times before. It was only by accident that my friend came across it. In addition to the 3 billion won loan from the bank under the couple's name, he owes 1.9 billion won to a high-interest financial institution. He probably borrowed a lot from loan sharks. So far, all these debts have been passed on to Ji Young. My friend admits that Hyuk's death is suspicious, but if we dig deeper, if it's found out that he embezzled public funds and forged witnesses, as a lawyer, his father-in-law's reputation would be ruined. So my friend hoped that Ji Young would accept the truth. That night, when Ji Young picked up her daughter and went home, she found a courier on the doorstep. Strangely, the sender didn't sign his name. Inside was a pair of exquisite high heels. Her husband had ordered them as a gift before he died. The card emphasized the importance of organizing the shoe closet. Ji Young immediately searched through the closet. She finally found a shoebox. Inside the shoebox, there was cash. Ji Young also found dozens of accident insurance policies in the box. The insured was her husband, Hyuk Jae. The beneficiaries were all in her name. The next day, Ji Young told her father-in-law about it, but he was concerned about whether there was anything else left behind. He was sure there was nothing else. He was convinced that his son was trying to pay back the money by cheating on the insurance. He told his daughter-in-law to give up her inheritance. In fact, Ji Young didn't care about the money. She wanted to find out the real reason for her husband's death. But her father-in-law believed that his son had arranged everything before he died and that he must have committed suicide. After so many days of investigation, Ji Young is certain that her husband violated the ethics of a lawyer. The cause of his death was not money, but something else. Unbeknownst to her, her mother-in-law overheard their conversation. Her father-in-law told Ji Young that the truth may not be right. Her son is dead, and even if she finds out the truth, she won't come back to life. At that moment, the kindergarten teacher called. Her daughter had been hospitalized. Ji Young rushed to the hospital immediately. Luckily, the child was fine. She was just a little shaken up. She ran out into the street. The teacher caught her in time and stopped her. When she got home, she tried to talk to her, but she said she saw her father. Ji Young thought it was normal for him to see a resemblance. It's normal to see someone who looks like him. The next time she sees him, she shouldn't run away. That night, a good friend revealed to Ji Young, Kim Yoon-sun had embezzled money from the company. That's why she was supposed to take the blame. Then he reminded Hyuk that he's with the bad guys too. It must be hard to resist the temptation of owing so much money. If not for her own sake, then she should think about her child. She's going to listen to her friend's advice. She'll give up investigating her husband's death for the sake of her family's honor and her child. However, while Ji Young was organizing Hyuk's belongings, she accidentally found Do Jin-woo's manslaughter file. Her husband was his defense attorney. Coincidentally, her father-in-law and mother-in-law both knew Kim Yoon-sun and Do Jin-woo. That means Do Jin-woo is on her husband's side. Ji Young called him immediately, but there was no answer, so she left a voicemail. If it's really her husband's man, she wants to tell him the truth. Then the long wait began. Do Jin-woo returned a message. He asked Ji Young to meet him. However, Do Jin-woo was on his way to the meeting place. A car cut him off on purpose. He lost his balance and fell off the road. The man in the car didn't want to let him go. He pulled out a shotgun from the trunk. He didn't hesitate to pull the trigger. After the first shot missed, the killer jumped over the railing. At the same time, Ji Young saw a car parked on the side of the road. She recognized Do Jin-woo's motorcycle right away. She stopped the car at a distance. She slowly approached. Do Jin-woo tried his best to escape. The killer fired a second shot. Do Jin-woo was shot in the waist. Ji Young was shocked when she heard the gunshot. She shouted at the assassin to call the police. The assassin fled the scene. When she found Do Jin-woo, he was lying in a pool of blood. She asked who the killer was, but he answered that it was her husband. An ambulance soon arrived and took Do Jin-woo away. Inspector Beck asked Ji Young if she saw saw the killer's face, although Ji Young didn't, but she was already suspicious of her husband's death. The next day, Inspector Beck came to the hospital to see Do Jinwoo. He found that he had escaped from the hospital. Ji Young received a message soon after. She went to a house according to last night's address. A flyer on the door caught Ji Young's attention. The words Chawong Welfare Foundation were printed on it. Ji Young went to the foundation to investigate. She found out that the resort, Chawong Welfare, and the Kim Shin Group, they're working together on a program to help the less fortunate. It's a temporary housing program for the elderly and the homeless. The guy who lives at that address is Wong Tai-bat. Hyuk recommended him to me. There's also a guy named Oh Young-sik. He lent someone a bank account and got blackmailed by the bank. The police are looking for him. When Ji Young thought something was wrong, she got a report about the law firm being illegally harassed. Luckily, Detective Beck was able to stop it. When Ji Young returned to the firm, my father-in-law had taken care of the matter. He guaranteed the debt collector. He asked the police to step up patrols in the neighborhood. He wanted to cover the debt with his son's insurance money. But that's where the suspicion lies. Hyuk can't be a lawyer and not know that suicide won't pay. Ji Young has made up her mind. She must investigate her husband's death. That night, she was awakened by a noise in the living room. She got up to check the place but found nothing unusual. While she was drinking water, a dark shadow flashed from behind. A stranger suddenly entered the house. Ji Young was hit hard by him. She called Inspector Beck, but the CCTV showed nothing. Nothing was missing from the house. Nothing was missing from the last time the law firm was raided. It seems that he didn't want to steal anything. Inspector Beck suspected that Ji Young was having an affair, so he started probing her. After Inspector Beck left, Ji Young installed more surveillance cameras at home. While she was analyzing the clues, Do Jinwoo rang the doorbell. Ji Young was curious. If the shooter was her husband, why didn't he tell the police? Ji Young thinks Do Jinwoo must have mistaken him for someone else. She also thinks that Kim Yoon-sun's death wasn't an accident. At that moment, Do Jinwoo told Ji Young. When he came home a few days ago, he ran into Hyukja. Taeju was lying on the ground with a badge on her sleeve. Do Jinwoo thought Taeju was drunk, so he didn't care. Hyuk said he'd take him to apply for an extension. Do Jinwoo helped him put Taeju in the car. Then Do Jinwoo was beaten up by Ma Jiang. In the meantime, he saw Taeju's badge. Do Jinwoo realized something was wrong. When he came back, Taeju had been missing for days, so he called the police. But the officer told him to go back and wait for news. Do Jinwoo had just stepped out of the police station when he saw Hyuk not far away. He was still wearing Taeju's clothes. When he went after him, Hyuk was gone. Apparently, Hyukja and Taeju switched identities. Ji Young guesses that her husband is trying to hide this and that's why he's going after Do Jinwoo. Do Jinwoo told Ji Young that she'll know the truth when she finds Taeju. To confirm what he said, Ji Young wants to retest the body's genes. When she arrived at the door, she saw a pair of shoes. Ji Young thought her husband had come home. She didn't realize it was Ma Jiang. He found the cash in the shoebox. He said it wasn't enough. It turns out that out of trust, Ma Jiang let Hack take care of the money. In the end, $7 billion of cash disappeared. Soon after, Pearly died. Ma Jiang thought he must have had a bad habit. Otherwise, he wouldn't have kept so much money. Before he left, he told Ji Young to return the money within a week. Otherwise, he'd treat her badly. Then Ma Jiang said it was time for her daughter to go home. Ji Young rushed off on the spot. Apparently, it was a warning from Ma Jiang. Ji Young then went to her husband's estate. She found out that her husband had helped 13 homeless people. She soon got the list. A man named Choi Byum-jun caught her attention. Ji Young went back to the law firm without stopping. She found a contract for a project. It's worth 7 billion won. That's when she realized what Ma Jiang had said. Why did he say 7 billion won? Ji Young came to Kim Shin Company. She didn't hesitate to barge into Ma Jiang's conference room. She didn't give these people a good look. The moment she saw the contract, Ma Jiang panicked. He kicked them out of the conference room. Ji Young, after all, was once an experienced prosecutor. She knew that the $7 billion was not Ma Jiang's money at all. Jinshin transferred $7 billion in cash to the homeless man's account. This is a typical money laundering signal. Ji Young knows that Ma Jiang alone is not capable of this. He must have more power behind him. Seeing that he's been exposed, in a panic, Ma Jiang tore up the contract. He said the money had nothing to do with Ji Young. Ma Jiang said he wasn't afraid of being exposed, but his legs were shaking. Ji Young knew he was scared, so she warned him that if he ever threatened her child again. Then Ji Young found Do Jinwoo. She told him that her husband's assistance to the homeless was a front. The real purpose was to use their account to launder money for Ma Jiang. She knew Do Jinwoo was looking for Taeju, so she took out Taeju's transaction details. After Hyuk's death, there's only one place for Taeju to get her money. Do Jinwoo was just about to reach for it, but Ji Young offered her an exchange. Ji Young offered her proof that her husband was still alive. That's how Ji Young got her husband's number. But there was no answer on the phone. After pouring a mouthful of wine, she opened the genetic test report. The contents of the report brought her to tears. She took the report and asked her mother-in-law why she sent someone else's genes for testing. After some communication, Her mother-in-law refused to admit it. She had no choice but to take out her husband's phone records. Her mother-in-law's number was in it. Then she got up and went to her father-in-law to discuss the matter. She didn't expect her mother-in-law to panic. Ji-young pushed open her father-in-law's door. She had to tell her husband's location. Ji-young soon arrived. Then her husband appeared behind her. Ji-young was surprised that he was still alive. As she watched her husband approach, at that moment, she exploded. How can he still be alive? At the same time, she hugged him, but suddenly her wife reacted. She asked him who the body he saw was, and if he killed Tae-ju. The husband innocently explained that he didn't. I took him to the hospital because he was drunk, but he died on the way. He was suffering from respiratory paralysis. The hospital told him not to drink. The wife still didn't understand. She asked her husband why he switched the body and said he was dead. The husband explained that he was forced to do it. He was supposed to work with Ma Jeong to build a resort, but he didn't realize that he had secretly embezzled $7 billion. He wanted him to launder the money. And then it all got out of hand. He grabbed me by the scruff of my neck. He started making me do a lot of things, including the old man, Mr. Park, who was killed in a car crash at the resort. He also asked me to find a witness for a female employee of his company, and I got Do Jin-woo. But this guy raised the price from the agreed price to $500 million. He compromised in order to get the job done. Before the trial, the more I thought about it, the more wrong it was. So I chose to fake my own death to avoid repeating my mistake. But my wife wondered why he shot Do Jin-woo. The husband had a different explanation. Do Jin-woo found out that I was still alive. He threatened me again and asked me for more money. In the panic, Do Jin-woo shot himself. That's why he didn't report me to the police even though he knew I was still alive. But the wife still has a question. Why does your mom know about you? The husband said lightly because of the emergency. Mom was the closest to my crime scene. That's why I chose to ask her to help me. And I left $500 million at home on purpose. With your intelligence, you should have realized that it's dirty money, so you can get Ma Jeong. As for the insurance money, I'm really scared. If Ma Jeong really kills me one day, you'll still get a big payout. Although her husband explained everything to her, but she felt that her husband was a stranger now, so she wanted to get up and leave. Her husband told her to calm down because he didn't want the secret to come out. The noise made by the two of them was overheard by a bald man who was passing by. When they heard someone knocking on the door, they panicked. Luckily, the bald man didn't go in with the food in his hand. I don't know if his wife is disappointed or doesn't trust him, so the husband gave her an important flash drive. This is the last weapon to protect you and your daughter. Now he can only live as Tae-ju. Then he left without looking back. But now Do Jin-woo is desperate. In order for the police to find Hyuk, he lied that it was Tae-ju who shot him that night and that he ran away. If you don't believe me, we'll go and take a look. Soon after, he took Inspector Beck to the countryside. While checking the electricity and water bills, there's no sign of usage. Do Jin-woo reminded him of that. This place is too clean. It looks like it's managed by someone. Look at them looking for Tae-ju. A bald guy passing by reminded him that he brought another girl back yesterday. He was playing a game and making a lot of noise. He didn't even bother him. Do Jin-woo realized what it meant, so he went to find Ji-young. He asked her if she'd seen her husband, but Ji-young denied it. Do Jin-woo didn't realize that the couple was working together. Luckily, he was smart enough to call the police. We'll see if they find Tae-ju or Hyuk-jae. The wife was scared, but she knew it was time to make a move. But Ji-young didn't realize that her daughter would be targeted the next day. Luckily, a car suddenly came by. The man didn't succeed. He knew it was the girl's teacher and neighbor. The teacher told the girl to get in the car first. Her mom couldn't make it. The girl didn't suspect a thing and got into the teacher's car, but she didn't know that the teacher was a bad guy. He was even worse than the bad guy. But the girl didn't realize that in their neighborhood, there was an unsavory person who had been waiting for half a day. When he spotted the girl alone at the front door, he started to make his move. He thought, I'll blame the child for being born in such a family. Soon the mother arrived home. She saw her daughter crying. There was even a man offering her candy. When she got out of the car, she knocked the candy out of the man's hand, and the man did come to comfort her. My daughter also said that another uncle told me that, in 4 days, my mom will abandon me. The mother was a little confused. She didn't understand what it meant until the man behind her sounded his horn. It was one of Ma Jeong's men. Ma Jeong told Ji-young to hand over $5 billion within a week. Otherwise, she'd be punished. But today, she just saw her husband, who was dead. He said she mustn't hand over the $5 billion because it's dirty money. There's nothing he can do if he doesn't hand it over. First of all, he doesn't dare to report to the police. Secondly, even if you hand it over, he won't let you go, because Ma Jiang is a ruthless man who can do anything. Not only did he beat up the evictor, he even crushed him to death when he saw that he wouldn't let him go. The female assistant in the car was so scared that she didn't know what to do. She wanted to call the emergency number, but Ma Jiang stopped her. Then she asked Ji Young's husband to persuade the assistant to take the blame. The company would forget about her embezzlement. And Ji Young's husband is a lawyer. He can help her defense and find witnesses for her. But the assistant died in a car accident. Her husband's car fell off a cliff and was burned to a crisp. But Du Jinwoo realized that her husband was still alive. But his brother, Taeju, was missing. But Ji Young says she doesn't know anything because at that moment, Ma Jiang's threatening text messages were too much for her to handle. Force him to hand over $5 billion, or you won't see your daughter in 4 days. So she invited the prosecutor's friend to dinner to remind her that she's busy tomorrow. Then the day before she was supposed to return the money, she found Ma Jiang. She thought the woman was here to return the money. She didn't expect Ji Young to hand him a complaint. She's suing him for breaking into a widow's house. She demanded $7 billion in damages. Ji Young said, if you win the case, I won't owe you any more money. Ma Jiang reminded her that it doesn't matter what you do. If you don't get the money, it's either me or you. Ji Young didn't take it seriously until the court hearing the next day. Ji Young filed a lawsuit against Ma Jiang for $7 billion. The judge wondered why he had to pay so much for breaking and entering, but he didn't expect Ji Young to turn on the surveillance video of the demolition house he ran over and killed. Now Ma Jiang was in a panic, so Ji Young wanted him to go to court. She wanted him to go to court and announce that he's guilty of intentional homicide. It turns out that Hurley had left something to chance. There was a parked truck nearby when he met with his husband in secret. Her husband gave her a flash drive to deal with Ma Gang. Soon the civil lawsuit became a criminal case and went to the prosecutor's office. I thought I could wait for my husband to come back and turn himself in, but I didn't expect the neighbor to invite me to her house for lunch. Ji Young agreed without asking what was going on. Little did she know that her neighbor Yunju was a wolf in sheep's clothing. On the surface, she invited a group of people to her home, but in fact, she wanted Ji Young to relax her guard. Then she prepared small gifts for everyone as a token of appreciation. First, she prepared 4 gifts but didn't give any to Ji Young. She didn't expect Yunju to prepare a special gift for her. It was a dessert for everyone. But when Ji Young opened it, it was $500 million in cash that she had lost and found. But didn't Ma Jiang take it? Soon after, she received a call from a friend that Ma Jiang is dead in jail. From Yunju's face, it's clear that she had a lot to do with this. After distracting a group of people, she took out the gift she had prepared. Ji Young receives it and realizes it's her husband, Hyuk Jae. She wonders how Yunju knew about it. She didn't realize that Ma Jiang's men were following Yunju's orders until she saw the video of her husband being tied up. Her wife realized what they were doing. Ji Young immediately thought that she killed Ma Jiang in the jail. Yunju didn't refute it but simply admitted it. She only wanted Ji Young to finish what Hyuk hadn't done. When she got back, she immediately called her husband. Strangely, there was no answer this time, but the ringtone was coming from inside the package. She had a bad feeling about it. When she opened it, there was a familiar gift box, and there was a cell phone of her husband's. Unexpectedly, there were obvious bloodstains on the phone and pictures of her husband after he was beaten. Now she couldn't sit still, so she went to Yunju's house again. But Yunju asked her to give the money in the bag to the person she promised. Ji Young is not stupid and asks to see if her husband is dead. Soon she was pulled to a faraway place by a car. Then she saw her husband as she wished. Now she has a lot of questions in her head. Who is Yunju? And what is the relationship between Ma Jiang and her? Her husband reminds her not to believe Yunju's words. She can't do anything she says. It's better to run away. Before the husband and wife can say a few words, they are forced to separate. Looking at her husband who is tortured like this, how could the wife not see death and save him? So she followed Yunju's orders and went to work as an errand boy. She went to the agreed place in the abandoned factory. Inside, there were already people waiting. I thought it would be a complicated transaction, but I didn't expect that the other party just counted the quantity. He also reminded us that we're on the same boat now. We'll have to help each other out in the future. Ji Young didn't know that she was on a path of no return. As promised, she waited anxiously for her husband to return at night. Suddenly, there was a noise at the door. She opened the door nervously and realized it was really her husband. She was heartbroken and dragged her husband into the house. At that moment, she felt that everything she had done was worthwhile, but she didn't realize that it was all a trick, because Yunju had a big gift for her. The family was finally reunited. While they were immersed in happiness, suddenly Yunju sent her a video. When she saw the video, Ji Young was in a state of shock. She thought that her husband, who came back from the dead, had no choice but to do those stupid things. I didn't realize that the whole family was crazy. If it wasn't for this video, she would have never known that they could be so crazy. So when she saw her daughter being fed milk, Ji Young's instinct was to stop her. She spilled the milk and swept her daughter into her arms. The family was completely shocked by her behavior, so she could only explain in a calm manner. Her daughter hadn't been digesting well lately. For the first time, she didn't dare to share her husband's bed at night, because at that moment, She already believed in her heart what Do Jinwoo had told her. Your husband is a bad person. Do Jinwoo was always trying to find her husband. Ji Young knew that he wanted money, so she suggested that he should stay out of it. But Do Jinwoo just refused. He said he's not in it for the money at all. He told Ji Young to tell Hyuk to honor their agreement. Ji Young was curious because her husband told her that Do Jinwoo was only after money. So Ji Young asked Do Jinwoo what the deal was. He told her to ask her husband, but now he's been kidnapped. Do Jinwoo didn't believe her. Hyukja is so amazing. He wouldn't be kidnapped. Do Jinwoo said he promised to help me find my daughter. That's why I did everything he told me to do. I didn't realize he was playing with me. At that time, he was still skeptical, until her female neighbor Yeonju sent her a video. Not only did she beat up the innocent Taeju violently, and her mother-in-law and her husband joined forces to murder him, but her husband told her he was kind enough to take the drunken Taeju to the hospital, but he died on the way. I didn't realize that in order to get a new identity, her husband and her son killed him on purpose. She couldn't understand her husband anymore, so the next day, she couldn't wait to find Yeonju. She asked her why she sent the video of her husband's murder to herself. Was she trying to threaten me to do something? Yeonju acted sympathetically. In order to put her mind at ease, she took the initiative to destroy the evidence by putting the video in the microwave. She also said that she won't intervene in this matter anymore, because I'm only responsible for seeing how lawyer law covers up your husband. Yeonju wanted to sit back and watch the show, but she got into trouble with the wrong person. She ended up on a path of no return. I didn't expect Ji Young to ask her husband to turn himself in at night, because the police already knew that Hyukja was alive. The husband was trying to figure out how to persuade his wife. Suddenly, an uninvited guest appeared. The wife wanted to explain Do Jinwoo's last gun case. The husband immediately interrupted and said that his words were not to be believed. Obviously, he's weak. Until Do Jinwoo lifted up his shirt to reveal his scar. He accused him of trying to kill me to silence me, so that the search for Taeju will be over? Hyuk Jae was still insisting that he didn't know anything about Taeju. That's when his wife brought out the video. Watching the whole process of Taeju's murder, the mother was in a state of panic. Hyukja beat Do Jinwoo without saying a word. He thought he filmed the whole thing, until his wife said that her neighbor Yeonju sent it to me. Hyuk Jae's eyes turned murderous. The neighbor seemed to know that Hyuk was coming and didn't even lock the door. I thought Hurley would kill Yeonju. I didn't expect that the two of them would eat each other uncontrollably in the next second. Ji Young didn't realize that they were in such a relationship. It turns out that Ma Jiang said before he died that they were just supporting actors. They are just here to accompany someone in a scene. In other words, to fulfill that couple. The neighbors wanted Ji Young to give up her husband, but they ignored Ji Young's temper. She hit the gas and plowed right into them. They didn't expect the cowardly Ji Young to die with them. They didn't realize that Ji Young was just trying to scare them, but that wasn't enough. He took the golf ball off the ground and hit her husband with a barrage of bullets, but the husband was no slouch. He gave his wife a big slap in the face. Ji Young gave him one in return. She said she'd send him to jail. The husband was so angry that he couldn't speak. Yeonju reminded her that you're an attempted murderer. Ji Young didn't want to say anything now. She just calmly took off the ring. The two of them didn't notice the neighbor's smug look. When he saw his wife leave, the husband knew he was doomed, so he had to take the initiative. The neighbor is praising Hyukja for his fierce wife. Hyukja wonders why he sent the video of the murder to his wife. Yeonju said it was out of jealousy. Hyuk just thought it was jealousy. He doesn't realize that what Yeonju said about jealousy has a deeper meaning. Hyukja reminded her not to do whatever she wants next time. Don't ruin our good deed. But Yeonju said that she just wanted to use this opportunity to make your wife break off her relationship with you, so that our plan won't be interrupted. The next day, Ji Young found Do Jinwoo. She realized that he found her husband because he was looking for her daughter, and the husband didn't even try to help him find his daughter. It's easy for a lawyer to find someone, so Ji Young helped him find his daughter, whom he'd never met before. Do Jinwoo was grateful for this favor. When Ji Young asked him about the relationship between the neighbor and her husband, Do Jinwoo said he knew about it. But when he found out Yeonju kidnapped Hyuk, I thought they broke up. I didn't realize it was just an act, and I wanted to go get my daughter back. But the orphanage told me that the child is happy now. That's why I was satisfied and didn't pick her up. In return, I'm willing to help you deal with Hyuk. Then he intentionally gave the envelope to a reporter with authority. Ji Young kept posting the truth about her husband's fake death. The news was all over the place. At the most critical moment, the wife came forward. She told her husband not to hide. Even if it's for the sake of the child, he should turn himself in as soon as possible. Watching his wife in front of the TV, she provoked him and forced him to show up. The husband lost his mind for a while, but he didn't expect Yeonju to give him a bad idea. Then she gave Hyuk a flash drive. It was all over the news that the husband had just died. The wife couldn't help but hook up with a young man. The two met in the house several times. The three of them analyzed the husband's anxiety to stamp his name. They felt that they had another purpose. It's like they're trying to buy time, just in case. The wife gave the police the video Yeonju sent her. It proves that the husband and son committed violent acts against the missing person, Taeju. The charred body that fell off the cliff is probably Taeju, but she never thought that her husband would show up in front of the public. He even went to the police to tell them that he was the victim. The police asked him to explain why he killed Taeju. I didn't realize that her said he was threatened by Ma Jian. Ma Jian was after Taeju for money laundering. He asked me to get Taeju drunk and send him to negotiate. If he didn't, he'd kill me. My mother helped me because she was afraid of my life. We don't know what happened to Taeju. Inspector Beck laughed when he heard that. He's trying to put all the blame on the dead Ma Jiang, and I'm depressed. I was afraid that Ma Jiang would hurt me, so I stayed at my friend's house for a while. You think I'm dead? Officer Beck was speechless with dislike. This also allowed Hyukja to perfectly reuse his identity to stand in front of the world. As soon as he got home, he and Yeonju worked out how to transfer the money to Taeju's shell company account in the next 2 days. Then, without leaving a trace, the two of them left the country to start a new life. But before he left, this father had a conscience. He accompanied his daughter to a big meal. He even tried to get his daughter to ask her if she likes living abroad. Anyway, he bragged about the country. Suddenly, the daughter saw her mom coming. But when the mother came, she ordered her daughter to go home. She didn't give her husband any face, but when she got home, she was very angry. She wanted to go with her father, and her wife realized something was wrong with her. But the old chairman here doesn't know that the woman next to him is about to make a move on him. On the surface, she reminds him that it's time for his maintenance injection. But what he's injecting isn't a health shot. When the medicine takes effect, Yeonju used the old chairman's fingerprints to open his account. She agonized for a night. She decided to take a risk. Soon after, she successfully transferred $80 billion. According to their plan at the time, they split up. Hyuk Jae will go abroad first after seeing the amount of money in the account. But when the assistant was buying the tickets, he never took his eyes off the password box in her hand. When they were about to board the plane, Curly deliberately slowed down. At that moment, the assistant was bumped into by someone, and there was a problem. At the same time, a group of police rushed into the airport. It's obvious that they're related to him. The two of them evacuated quickly. After hearing her daughter's words, the wife knew her husband was up to something, so she immediately approached Inspector Beck. She reported that she saw her husband shoot Do Jin-woo with a shotgun, and that he must be responsible for the missing Taeju. Inspector Beck asked her what she wanted to say. Ji-young told her to intercept her husband at the airport. There's a good chance he'll use Taeju's identity to leave the country. Once he's out of the country, there's no way out. We have to stop him from leaving the country. After hearing that, Beck went to the airport immediately. Ji-young and Do Jin-woo have an appointment with the key man, Choi Ho-sik. He's the son of the chairman who lives next door. If she hadn't seen her neighbor Yeonju calling him chairman, she wouldn't have found his son so easily. By virtue of her husband's sudden departure from the country, she concluded that Yeonju and her husband must have gotten the old chairman's money. When her son heard that, he ordered the financial department to check the old man's money, and Yeonju realized that Hyuk Jae was playing tricks on her. She was so angry that she wanted to go there to look for him, but as soon as she left the house, she was stopped by the police. Apparently, her secret money transfer was discovered. It turns out that her identity is the managing director of the old chairman's company. They arrested her for embezzlement and fraud. I thought it would all be over. Ji-young showed a look of victory, but Yeonju gave her 3 words. Let's see who's laughing last. Ji-young thought she was talking about her husband's change of heart, but what Yeonju did next took her by surprise. At the airport, Inspector Beck found out that Taeju had booked a flight. That means that person is probably Hyukja. Hyukja was about to run away. He was spotted by Do Jin-woo. Then the plainclothes police gave chase. The chase went on into the night, but the escape route shows that he can't get far. He had nowhere to run but to face him head-on. First, he burned his identity as Taeju. Then, when his team arrived, he asked why they were chasing him. Officer Beck told him to stop pretending. You're planning to leave the country under Taeju's identity, aren't you? I didn't realize that her said I don't know what you're talking about. I'm here for Taeju, too. Seeing him speak with such confidence, Do Jin-woo immediately kicked down the stove next to him. But Hyuk was in a panic. Do Jin-woo found the half-burned passport, but he couldn't tell whose passport it was. I didn't expect him to destroy the evidence at the crucial moment. Hyuk Jae was relieved. But strangely, Yeonju, who was arrested, asked Ji-young to be her defense attorney. Ji-young finally realized that her husband's kidnapping was a staged drama. They made her run errands, make deals, and bribe politicians. They grabbed her and forced her to accept to be Yeonju's defense attorney. In fact, Yeonju was just playing with her to see if she would give up the so-called justice for herself. But she never expected that before she even started, Officer Beck indicated that Yeonju could go home. The eldest son of Kim Shin Properties has dropped the case. Ji-young realized that she was fooled. Even Hyuk Jae couldn't understand Yeonju, who wanted to run away with him. Why did the other party drop the case after making such a big mistake? Unbeknownst to him, it's all a game within a game. When Yeonju got out of the police station, she went to the hospital to take the chairman home. It's not true that the chairman especially likes her. With her sweet mouth, she coaxed the old chairman into a frenzy. Then Ji-young took him to see the sea. The old chairman is now in a semi-conscious state, but he held Yeonju's hand and couldn't let go. Yeonju took a look at him and couldn't help but feel sad. In fact, I've always treated you like a father. I know you're good to me, but only when you're demented, and every time you're awake. You look for your son first. I guess I didn't win the blood relation after all, but it doesn't matter. It'll all be over soon. In fact, Mr. Chairman wasn't too stupid. He knew exactly what the end meant. When he went back at night, he found Hyuk-jae waiting for her at home. Apparently, he had a lot of questions for Yeonju. After settling the old chairman down, Hyuk-jae asked the chairman's eldest son, Choi Ho-sik, why he dropped the case, and why did you appoint my wife as your defense attorney at the police station? Yeonju scolded him for being so ambitious. If you're pretending to run away with me, you should act like it. Hyuk-jae doesn't care about that bullshit love right now. He's just curious that Choi Ho-sik won't easily drop the lawsuit and let you swallow the $80 billion. So what kind of deal did you make with that guy? Yeonju just glanced out the window, so she just opened the curtains. Hyuk-jae realized something. Sure enough, he saw his daughter across the street looking at them. He was so scared that he immediately hid to the side. Yeonju scolded him for being a coward, while deliberately closing the curtains again. And this scene makes people's imagination come to mind. Although the daughter is only 8 years old now, but children nowadays are very precocious. At this time, the mother can see that her daughter is not happy. The child was smart enough to ask her mom why her father didn't come home. At first, the mother wanted to lie and say that her father had something to do at her grandmother's house, but her daughter pointed to the neighbor's house. She said her father had been abducted by the neighbor's aunt. I just saw them upstairs. After hearing this, Ji-young aggressively knocked on the neighbor's door. Yeonju provoked your husband to stay upstairs in my house. I'm too ashamed to call the police. But the husband came out of his own accord. Ji-young scolded him for showing off how much you love each other in front of the kids. Hyuk-jae was about to explain that it wasn't what the kids saw. Suddenly, Do Jin-woo came over, but her husband laughed at her for being like him. Ji-young didn't want to get involved and pulled Do Jin-woo away, and Yeonju looked like she couldn't see the show. Unbeknownst to her, her expression made Ji-young feel more and more out of sorts when she got back. Though her husband is not a good person, but she knows that he wouldn't do that in front of the kids, and the fact that their elopement didn't work means there's a problem. Hyuk-jae seems to have been kept in the dark. That means Yeonju's goal is not for money, neither is it an affair. The target should be me. Yeonju and the old chairman have been living in harmony for more than 2 years. Usually, she likes to put headphones on him. She knew that this might be the last time. The old chairman seemed to have a premonition and immediately stopped Yeonju. Then he said, "Forget everything and find a good man to marry." Obviously, the old chairman had already guessed what Yeonju was going to do to him. He didn't blame Yeonju. Instead, he customarily put on the headphones. At this moment, Yeonju couldn't hold it in any longer. She bowed because she had to. Now that she broke up with Hyuk-jae, she's ready to close the net. In order to achieve her goal, she had to be ruthless. In her heart, she thought that if there's a life to come, she'd like to pay back the old chairman. Ji-young started monitoring Yeonju's movements early in the morning, but this time, the assistant actually changed cars, so she kept an eye out and filmed it. Soon her friend helped her to find out that it's Yeonju's father. Ho Jae-kun's car. Ji-young always felt something was wrong. Her chai learned that Yeonju went to the headquarters for a meeting. He thought it was a good opportunity to get close to the old chairman, but he doesn't know that Do Jin-woo has been following him. When her had just entered the house, he realized that someone was pushing the chairman, and Yeonju has been watching the surveillance at home. The chairman suddenly had an attack. He wanted to get some medicine from the drawer, but realized that there was none, so he had to go to the car to get it. He didn't realize that the medicine in the car had been tampered with, seeing that the chairman was already in pain, so he gave him an injection. The old man's movements became very strange. Hyuk-jae, who saw the scene outside the house, was stunned, seeing that the old chairman had already been injected with the medicine. Yeonju couldn't bear to watch, but the old man's eldest son was watching Yeonju's face the whole time. Obviously, this is a plan between the two of them. Hyuk-jae finally realized that the other party is planning to kill the old chairman. The sudden change made Yeonju nervous. Hyuk-jae doesn't want the old chairman to die. He also wants to know the relationship between Yeonju and his son. At this time, Do Jin-woo, who came here, happened to see the scene in front of him. The two of them communicated with each other with their eyes. The eldest son knows that his father is dead, but the strange thing is that the person who injected the drug was so scared that his hands were trembling. At night, Yeonju asked Ji-young to do her a favor. "The old man I live with is dead. My father was arrested on suspicion of murder for injecting him. Please defend my father." Yeonju wonders why I'm defending your father. Yeonju asked her, "Don't you want to know why I'm trying to destroy your family? If you take this case, the truth will come out. So she met Yeonju's father. She wanted to see what Yeonju was up to. When she saw the person in front of her, she felt bad about herself, because this man is her real father. Ever since she could remember, her father would always take her away at night every once in a while. But that day, a close friend who called himself her father was looking for him urgently, so he took him to his new place. But he didn't realize that his act of kindness would lead to an unforeseen situation. While Ji-young was sleeping in a daze, her father told her that you can only live if I die. The next day, the police found a body. They asked her to identify the body, but she agreed that it was her father. Now, why did her father appear as Yeonju's father? He even made himself the defense attorney. She didn't realize that Yeonju had been waiting for this for a long time. Ji-young knows that Yeonju is taking revenge on them. She wants to get the truth about what happened back then. At the same time, as an eyewitness, Hyuk-jae was at the police station to make a statement. He casually read the information of the culprit. I didn't realize that he was not only Yeonju's father, he even hired his wife as a defense attorney. Although he felt that something was wrong, but he suddenly had a bad idea. Then he went to see Yeonju's father in the cell. He first asked the father if his daughter had told you about us. When he found out that she hadn't, Hyuk-jae said that your father and daughter weren't close anymore. He said that because he wanted to provoke the relationship between father and daughter. Then he said he was the only witness at the scene. I know you didn't intend to kill anyone, and Yeonju prepared all the drugs. I can testify for you. If you say one word for me, I can help you get rid of the suspicion of murder. You just have to tell the police that you were ordered by your daughter. Yeonju's father laughed coldly. Hyuk-jae thought the other man didn't believe him, and told him that my wife is your defense attorney. I'll definitely be on your side. Seeing that his daughter is in love with such scum, he left without saying a word. But Hyuk-jae suddenly felt that he'd seen this man somewhere before. He's afraid that Yeonju won't know that someone is stabbing her in the back. Ji-young told her that my husband went to see his father yesterday. She asked me to put the blame on you. Yeonju wasn't surprised. This is your husband's style of doing things. On the surface, Yeonju doesn't care, but in fact, she knew that this statement had already made Yeonju sit up and take notice. When Ji-young came home, she noticed something strange in the house. There were even men's shoes on the floor. She instinctively picked up the umbrella. If the other person jumped at her, she would have stabbed her in the stomach with the umbrella. But she didn't realize it was her husband. You know, he's been living in the neighbor's house, and this time, the husband came home and found out his wife's secret. A photo was enough to prove that her wife was something else. He twisted the photo into a ball and threw it at his wife. He accused her of being a good actress. Your father wasn't dead. At that time, you pretended to be so sad that you couldn't think straight. I thought you were being pushed to the brink by the debt collectors. I was kind enough to bring you home. I even begged my parents to help you pay. Without saying a word, my father paid for your dead father. I thought you were too excited to show any emotion. I didn't realize you'd been acting the whole time. Are you tired of hiding it for so long? I thought I was bad enough, but you're worse than me. And Ji-young felt that if he didn't speed up his pace, she was afraid that the guy in front of her would do something reckless. So the next day, she went to her father. She told him her nickname was Wolverine. I'll stand up for what I believe in and defend my conscience. And sooner or later, your identity will be found out. Yeonju must have thought of the next step as well. So I just want to know the truth about that year. Did you really kill Yeonju's father? After coming out, Ji-young had mixed feelings. The answer given by his father was that he really didn't kill him. But as soon as she got home, she knelt down at the neighbor's door. She knelt not only for her father but also for her own ignorance. I understand why Yeonju hated them so much. Back then, Yeonju's father and her father were drinking inside the house. I don't know how long it took for them to fight outside the house. Yeonju's father wanted him to pay back the money. He brought him to the cliff to scare him, but while they were fighting, Yeonju's father stepped on a foot and fell into the cliff. He would have been killed if he fell in a thunderstorm, but he still came to the cliff to look for him. At that moment, Yeonju's father was still alive and convulsing. He wanted to go up and save him, but now he can't afford the debt of a lifetime plus the cost of treatment. So he looked at the fast-flowing river. A ruthless idea came to his mind. He opened his identity wallet and put it on Yeonju's father. He didn't do anything else. He just waited for the tide to rise and soaked the body in the water, so that he couldn't recognize his identity. Although his father didn't kill him, but he indirectly killed Yeonju's father. At the age of 17, Ji-young didn't understand anything. She only remembers her father telling her that the police will let you identify the body tomorrow. He said it was his father, so Yeonju should hate them, but her husband hates them even more. Their family was used like fools by their father and daughter, but Hyuk-jae is more concerned about the $80 million than he is about his hatred. The money is still in Taeju's shell company. He has to get the money before Yeonju does, and if Yeonju goes to jail, then the $80 million will be his. Knowing that Hyuk-jae is trying to harm himself for the money, Yeonju asked him to be a witness. So Yeonju asked him to be a witness. When the time comes, he will say in court that he saw my father kill the old chairman with his own eyes. Hyuk-jae, You've been approaching me with a purpose from the beginning. It's just to use me as a stepping stone for Ji Young's revenge. So your goal is not the $80 billion. Yeonju, I admit that I'm not interested in money, but if you testify for me in court and put the old man in jail, I'll give you the power of attorney and you go get the $80 million yourself. Soon, the trial for the murder of the old chairman began, but I didn't expect Ji Young to admit that Ho Jae-ju did kill the old chairman as soon as the trial started. She also admitted all the facts of the crime. This result made Yeon-ju never expected. What I didn't expect was Ji Young's claim that her Jae-ju's identity was wrong. The defendant sitting next to me is my father, Na Suk-jin. He stole the identity of the deceased her Jae-jo. Yeon-ju didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but she won't let them go so easily. In fact, before the trial, father and daughter had already agreed, although the father didn't kill the chairman. But Yeon-ju had already set a trap. If I plead your innocence at the beginning, Yeon-ju would have overturned it and made us murderers. This time, let's take it as the price for escaping. It's so easy to close the case. Yeon-ju couldn't accept it. Then she turned around and said, I won't let you go so easily. When Ji Young came home, Yeon-ju was already waiting. Ji Young tried to persuade her to let go of her 20 years of hatred and live a good life. They will also accept the punishment given by the court. Yeon-ju looked like she was listening to a joke. Is this the end of 20 years of pain? Ji Young asked her what she really wanted. She didn't realize that Yeon-ju wanted her to be a lonely person like herself. Didn't I take your husband? Your daughter will be next. Ji Young got anxious and warned her not to touch her daughter. But that warning didn't work on a crazy person. When Ji Young went to the classroom to get her daughter, she realized that the desserts were spilled all over the floor and panicked. Ji Young asked her why she was hiding alone. She told her that the neighbor's aunt brought me dessert and I ignored her. She's the bad person who stole my dad. Ji Young couldn't bear the thought of her daughter being hurt, but she didn't realize that her husband was also after her daughter. After getting the power of attorney to verify its authenticity, she alone could withdraw the full amount of $80 billion from Switzerland. So she sent a message to her daughter. She asked her to come and live with her father at her grandmother's house. Then she told her mother to take Haru to Switzerland. Then she'd meet you there. But I didn't expect that. Yeon-ju didn't stop for a second. She held a press conference without following the rules. The resort that Kim Shin Properties and lawyer Chow Wong are working on is suspended. The people are furious. Who's going to compensate them for their loss if it's suspended? You can't be irresponsible just because the old chairman died, right? The more the people are angry, the happier Yeon-ju is, because her goal is to put the people's anger on Chawang Foundation's head. Soon Ji Young received a call from her friend telling her to be careful. There's a possibility that the people will come to your house to make trouble. So they analyzed it. It turns out they never intended to build a resort in the first place. They embezzled the old chairman's money under the pretense of building a resort for the people. Now they're reversing it. On the one hand, it's a way to embezzle money, and on the other hand, it's probably a way to bring down the Chawang office. Sure enough, when they got home, they found their house with graffiti all over it. They were threatened and intimidated. Luckily, they were prepared. Ji Young told her not to be afraid, because we're all lawyers, so it's normal for people to get angry with us from time to time. Then she asked her daughter if she wanted to move. I didn't expect her to tell her father. The father was still packing to go abroad. Suddenly the daughter sent a text message telling him they were moving. Now the father started to jump the gun. He won't allow his daughter to be taken away by Ji Young, because Yeon-ju didn't report her unauthorized action to her superior, Choi Ho-sik. Choi Ho-sik is furious and asks her if she's out of her mind. To suspend the program at this time will cause endless losses to the company. But Yeon-ju had already thought of a countermeasure, handed him a USB flash drive containing evidence of his crimes. This is a copy of the original evidence on my side. Even if he or she did something outrageous, you have to put up with it. Choi Ho-sik did not expect to be set up by his subordinates, but Yeon-ju didn't know that messing with Choi Ho-sik was her worst decision. Ji Young's worst fear came true. Her daughter was taken away from her, and there was nothing she could do about it. She could only tremble with anger. Behind her, Officer Beck is also helpless. Who let her child have such a father? The mother knew what it meant, so she went to the neighbor's house in a rage. But she didn't realize that her mother-in-law was hiding and watching. Ji Young asked her why she did it. She pretended that it was for her granddaughter's sake. Ji Young understood and instantly turned on Yeon-ju. She grabbed Yeon-ju and wanted to beat her up, but the mother-in-law helped the outsider to beat her daughter-in-law. She threw her daughter-in-law away. She went up and gave Yeon-ju a big slap, but Yeon-ju wasn't a vegetarian either. Soon both of them were taken to the police station, but the husband is really not a good person. In front of the police, he said that his wife started it. Because of the husband's words, the police ruled that her temperamental child was not fit to stay with her. She can't visit or contact the child during this period. With this judgment, the husband could move faster. At night, The father couldn't wait to tell his daughter, "This school abroad is amazing. I've already prepared for you. You'll go with grandma tomorrow. I'll meet you abroad in a day or two." The daughter didn't say anything on the surface, but she knows it means she's leaving her mom. Ji-young here is crying her heart out. She can't see her and can't contact her. Jin-woo told her not to worry. She can use her cell phone. Ji-young tearfully sent a message to her daughter. "Tell her to bear with me and I'll get you back." After that, she searched for information to prove that the child's grandmother was incapable of raising the child, but she didn't realize that her daughter was already preparing to go abroad with her grandmother, afraid that her daughter would change her mind. Her father promised her that the school would be the best. On the surface, the daughter agreed, but in fact, she was thinking about how to deal with it. When she arrived at the airport, she had to use the restroom. In fact, she wanted to send a message to her mom. Grandma is outside the door, urging the plane to take off soon. Soon after sending the message, the girl acted as if nothing had happened. The mother immediately rushed to the airport when she got the news, but there was no sign of them. The more she searched, the more anxious. Also know that he finally did not make it to see his daughter one last time. When they got back, Jin-woo showed them the photos that Haru had taken of them. "That means they're going to this school. My friend was impressed by how smart she was. Even if she's abroad, she knows where she is." Ji-young calmed down. "That's good. She has more energy to deal with her husband and neighbor Yeonju, and she's come up with a plan. In 3 days at the earliest, she'll be able to put an end to everything. And now she has to start with Yeonju." Ji-young's steps to success. She found Choi Ho-sik, who is a thief. It's obvious that the two of them have reached some kind of agreement. When she found out that her daughter was taken out of the country by her grandmother, she knew her husband would follow her. Sure enough, her husband is now dragging his luggage and preparing to fly to Switzerland. At the crucial moment, Ms. Beck pretended to be calm when she ran into him. She asked him under whose name he was leaving the country. Hurley denounced a police officer for having the right to tell people whether to leave the country or not. He didn't expect the prosecutor to file a complaint against him, because he's a big suspect in the disappearance of Taeju, the woman she beat up. This was part of Ji-young's plan to keep Cha's husband out of the country. Her husband's father destroyed the information on Taeju. The head of the firm thought something was wrong, so he made a copy of all the information. Then he gave it to Ji-young. Ji-young knew she was right about him. Although Taeju is dead, he still has a brother. If the burnt body matches his brother, it'll prove Hyuk's guilt in his death. Even though he's a suspect and can't leave the country, but Hyuk-jae still didn't give up, so he found Yeonju. First, he blamed her for tricking him with her words. "You enjoyed using me as a tool for revenge, but I ended up in this situation, and it was all for naught. You don't care about money, but I don't want to give up the $80 billion. I didn't realize Yeonju would remind him. "You'd better hurry, because the results of the genetic analysis will be out in a week." Hertz don't understand what it means. Yeonju laughed and said, "You don't know, do you?" Hyuk-jae said that Ji-young wouldn't do that to me, but the next moment, he couldn't wait to find Ji-young. When he got home, he hurriedly searched for information. Ji-young told him not to waste time. All the information was turned over to the prosecutor's office. In anger, Hyuk-ja smashed the house to pieces. When Yeonju came home, she had a bad feeling. The windows and doors were smashed. Then she quickly went upstairs. When she saw the open combination box, her head began to numb. She knew that inside was the data of her superior, Choi Ho-sik. As soon as she presses the enter key, Choi Ho-sik's life could have been ruined, but I never thought it would be stolen. Seeing this, Yeonju is going crazy. It turns out that Ji-young installed a surveillance camera here, and it's thanks to Yeonju's sidekick that she was able to install the surveillance, because Yeonju found the evidence that the assistant planted on his father. "My father is currently in jail. It's because of the faulty medicine you provided that the old chairman died, so all I have to do is provide the doctor's prescription and the video of you taking the medicine. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison." So the assistant had to compromise. Ji-young had to help Choi Ho-sik to get something on him so that she could use her power to fight. Yeonju seemed to sense the end of her road as well, so she took a deep breath. She wants to make a final struggle. Before struggling, she went to see Ji-young's father in prison. She told him that your daughter is living a life that's worse than death because of you. Then she tried to go home quickly to get her passport and leave. But when she got there, she realized something was wrong. The door shouldn't have been opened, so she sneaked upstairs to see who had entered her house. She didn't realize that her assistant was quickly taking the cash from the safe. She was angry, but she didn't realize her assistant was worse. Tearing up her passport meant she couldn't leave the country at all, and that's exactly what hit Yeonju's bottom line. Then he grabbed a knife, and then he stabbed the assistant's neck without any hesitation. The assistant never thought Yeonju could be so cruel, but at that moment, Hyuk-jae called her. He called her and asked her where she was. "I've packed my things and I'll come to you." Yeonju calmly took a shower and came out. When Hyuk-jae saw the assistant on the floor, he was so scared that he couldn't speak. He urged Yeonju to leave quickly, otherwise, she'll be in jail for the rest of her life. In fact, Hyuk-jae was afraid that if Yeonju was arrested, he wouldn't be able to open Taeju's bank account, so he pretended to persuade Yeonju to leave the country with him immediately. He has already found a stowaway boat. We'll be out of here by 10 p.m. soon. Yeonju was taken to the boat by Hyuk-jae, but at that moment, Yeonju suddenly found the company's cargo box. She suddenly realized what it meant. It's true that Hyuk-jae is not a good person. In order for him to succeed in the smuggling, he negotiated with Choi Ho-shik. As long as he is responsible for getting him to Switzerland, I'll help you get rid of Yeonju without anyone realizing it. Hee-ja also said that he didn't want the $80 billion. When Yeonju realized that things were bad, she wanted to turn back, but it was too late. Hyuk-jae has already made his move on her. Just when Hyuk-jae was giving her the last blow, he was knocked down by someone's foot. Ji-young came in time. If Ji-young hadn't secretly installed a surveillance camera in Yeonju's house, she wouldn't have found this place so easily. But Yeonju didn't thank her. Instead, she asked him if he received a big gift. At that moment, Ji-young's cell phone rang. When she found out that her father committed suicide in prison and is still in the emergency room, Ji-young knew that Yeonju had done something to her father. Yeonju is still cursing at that kind of person who is not worthy of first aid. Ji-young is still sensible and wants to punish Yeonju with the law, so she can't do anything. But Hyuk-jae fought back and knocked Do Jin-woo to the ground. Then he came towards Yeonju with a murderous look in his eyes. Ji-young told him to wake up and not to make the same mistake again, but Hyuk-jae told Ji-young to get out of the way. Ji-young not only didn't move away, but protected Yeonju. Look at Do Jin-woo. He's coming slowly, but Yeonju jumped into the river with Ji-young in her arms. Do Jin-woo jumped in without saying a word. Hyuk-jae's legs were weak. Then he showed a look of victory. Fortunately, when the police found them, they had already made it to the shore. Only Yeonju is still unconscious, but he can't avoid the prison sentence that awaits him. On the other hand, has successfully arrived at the Swiss bank. He signed Taeju's name fluently. If he passes the audit, he'll be able to receive the $80 billion in his account. Meanwhile, the police have gotten the charred body and matched it with Taeju's brother's DNA. The results show that the dead person is really Taeju. With this report, Interpol can be mobilized across the border. The Swiss side has reviewed the report. The stamp means the cash can be withdrawn. But at that moment, a call came in. The clerk wants to know if you're really Taeju. Hyuk's heart was in his throat, so he pretended to say that his passport was in the car and I'd go out to get it. In fact, he knew his identity had been exposed. As soon as he left the house, he quickly fled. Then he called Choi Ho-shik and asked what to do. The money can't be withdrawn by anyone now. The caller said on the surface that it was a pity. Then he said that he had a gift for him and asked him to take it and hung up. When he turned his head, he saw 3 big men walking towards him. He had a bad feeling, but it was too late. They didn't give him a chance to live. Soon, Heck was beaten to a pulp. If the police hadn't passed by, he'd have lost his life here. But unfortunately, although he was treated in time, but Hyuk-jae is already in a vegetative state. Yeonju is no better. She'll spend the rest of her life in jail. Ji-young got her daughter back from her mother-in-law because she helped her son. She was arrested for killing Taeju. Ji-young's father survived, and she got a granddaughter. Ji-young breathed a sigh of relief, even though she had taken care of everything herself. I don't know why she felt so empty, but one thing she knows is that she's on her own. Maybe this is a new chance for her to be born again. She must cherish it.